Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale. Today we are joined by Light Pollux. He is an amazing YouTuber, French YouTuber. For those of you who don't follow him, check him out just for the gameplay alone. He's very underrated and a great guy and a great musician. I'm going to go ahead and link you guys a special treat of one of his song videos. I really like this guy. I can't say enough good things about him. So today we're going to be reviewing his very interesting chip deck. We're going to give you a full review, a complete guide to the deck, as we like to do here on CWA Pro Tips. Man, that was so self-promoty. As we like to do here on CWA Pro Tips, guys, we're going to give you everything you need to know about this deck and everything that has to do with it. So let's start with the substitutions and quit the cringy corniness. So substitutions. For Princess, you just want to go ahead and use the Dark Goblin. For Miner, though, we can't use the Miner. We can't use this deck, excuse me, if we don't have the Miner. The Miner is a quintessential part of this deck, so rather than force feed you a win condition that's just not going to work with this deck, let's be honest. You can't use the deck if you don't have Miner. So if you don't have Miner and you want to play a chip deck, your best bet is just to play the classic bait deck. But this deck is really cool because if you do have Miner. Sorry, guys. So this deck is really cool, right? You have the Minion Horde. You have all three Goblins. So you have Goblin Gang, you have Goblins, and you have the Goblin Barrel. So it's like the classic chip deck that OJ covered over a year ago, that Rumham wrote about over a year ago on Reddit. It's really cool, and it has the Tesla. The Hidden Tesla is probably my favorite defense right now in the game. I just think it's so cool. It's so strong, and I feel like it's almost underrated, or certainly underused right now given its strength. Even if you're playing a Hog Cycle deck, if you're playing even a beatdown deck, I think that you have really two options. You know, Lava Loon, you can use Tombstone. But anything else, you know, if you're playing a Miner control deck, if you're playing, it doesn't matter. If you're looking for a defensive unit, I think that you can't go wrong right now with Tesla, or maybe Tornado being the, you know, it's not really a defense, but it serves that purpose in decks. So anyway, after that huge long preamble, let's really get to the crux of the guide here. So offense. There's two main ways to win the game with this deck. A, you just do chip damage. It is a chip deck with all your Goblins, your Goblin Gang. This is a deck that you will be playing those cards at the bridge from time to time. Or one big monster push, meaning the Miner with the Minion Horde, or the Miner Goblin Barrel and Goblin Gang at the bridge, just going all out because you know your opponent doesn't have their go-to counter in rotation in cycle. So that's when you punish them and you take advantage. But you have to have a real keen awareness of where your opponent's spells are at, of course, to make that happen. Now, what if they have too many spells? If they have too many spells in their deck, maybe they're running 3 spells, really annoying, right? Tornado, Log, and Fireball, or something ridiculous like that. Well, you're going to have to be relying more on the chip aspects of this deck to win, okay? You're probably going to win 1 tower to nothing more often than not with this deck. It is a chip deck after all. However, that doesn't mean that you can't take a little bit of damage to your towers. We'll talk about that when we talk about the defense on this deck. So after knowing their spell cycle, you can defend with your Minion Horde or your Goblin Gang, and then just go ahead and counter push with a Goblin Barrel, a Juke Goblin Barrel, so you throw it a little bit further. That way the log doesn't hit it, obviously. Or you can go ahead and send in just the Miner if you know they don't have good answers to it. So you have a variety of counter push options as you normally would a Miner deck, like a Miner Poison. You also have 2 techniques that Light Pollux called it that you can use with this deck. Technique number 1 is just a really good strong counter push to chip and finish the towers. So of course we talked about that in the previous sequence there. Now the other way is the Princess at the bridge. Now the Princess, let's pause for a moment and talk specifically about the Princess. She's a really, really strong card, and you guys who've been watching CWA a while know this, right? If you use the Princess in your deck, you're going to want to protect her, okay? So it's not a card that you just play in sacrifice, you know? So playing her at the bridge is a really bold move, and you're only going to do it if you know your opponent doesn't have absolutely anything that's going to disrupt her in hand, or if the tower is low on damage. So if there's only a few hundred HP left on the tower, sure, you can close off the game with a princess at the bridge. This deck doesn't have that big spell. The trade-off for it being so defensively robust is you don't have that big spell to finish off that tower. So you can resort to using the princess to do a little bit of chip damage. So that's basically the offense, guys. It's an old-fashioned chip deck. Now, defense, it's a really, really powerful defensive deck. Against hog decks, any sort of a hog deck, especially hog cycle, Light Pollux shared a little tip for me to pass on to you guys, which I think is really going to help you when playing this deck. I think it's these type of tips that really can help you way beyond just watching the replays in the background, and that's what I like to focus on here when we do these deck reviews. So the tip that we're going to focus on is how to deal with a Hog Rider with this deck. So you have the Tesla. The Tesla is obviously your go-to defense against a Hog, but Light Pollux never likes to open up a Hog match using the Tesla unless he doesn't have anything else good in hand. But with this deck, you pretty much always have something decent in hand because you have the 3 goblins, the Goblin Gang, the Goblin Barrel, and the goblins themselves. Of course, you're not going to be using the Goblin Barrel, but you also have the Minion Horde as well. So you have 3 options. And Light Pollux, the big rule to starting out a match with this deck, especially against Hog, is you want to counter the Hog push with as little elixir as possible. So using just goblins would be the first priority against stopping a Hog. If you don't have goblins, use just the Goblin Gang. You want to try to exchange 1 hit on the Hog to figure out what your opponent's going to do. Do they have Zap? Do they have Log? And you want to force that spell out with the Hog. So even if you have Tesla in hand, you'd rather go ahead and counter with just goblins and let them use the Zap and the Hog against your goblins. That would be wasting a Zap on your opponent, and it would be really, really good for you because your goblins survive, they kill the Hog, you have a positive elixir advantage now, a really nice elixir trade there, and then it's going to help you further into the match as well. So there's a little mental game you can play with your opponent. The first 2 times they send in Hog, don't use the Tesla. Use whatever else you have, even the Minion Horde. Goblin Gang, Minion Horde, Goblins, right? And then after that, you're going to be switching to your Tesla the rest of the match. What that's going to do is your opponent is going to start predictively playing the Log or a Fireball or whatever they have for spells with the Hog. And when you switch to Tesla, 9 times out of 10, you're going to catch your opponent way off guard, and that's going to be delivering you a free anywhere from 2 to 4 elixir throughout the rest of the match. Just make sure you play the Tesla in an area that won't be susceptible to the Fireball if that's what your opponent thinks you're going to do. Oftentimes the opponent will combo with a Fireball if you open up with a Minion Horde to counter a Hog. So even though the Minion Horde versus a Hog is a -1 elixir trade, obviously your Minion Horde stays alive and you can counter push with a Miner, so even using a Minion Horde over a Tesla is a good idea at the beginning of the match. So what about 3 Musketeers? Because 3 Musketeers is the most difficult matchup with this deck. So how are you going to handle that matchup? Well, Light Pollux gave me a very special set of instructions to pass on to you guys, so listen up. Stop zoning out. Listen. All right, so against 3 Musketeers, this deck has a challenge. Every deck pretty much has a challenge against 3 Musketeers unless you're running something crazy like Mega Knight, Fireball, Zap all in the same deck. So what you do is Princess in the back towards the solo Musketeer. Princess in the back towards the single Musketeer. The lane split with only 1 Musketeer. After that, you're going to go ahead and use the Goblin Barrel in a safe spot. In a safe... what am I doing? What am I talking about? No, you're gonna split when they split the 3 Musketeer Goblin Barrel. I'm reading the wrong part of the tips, and I'm like, why does it say using a Goblin Barrel? I'm reading the opening plays. Okay, my bad, guys, my bad. It's a shame that I don't edit these videos. So listen up. Let's start this again. Listen up, guys. All right, so when they split 3 Musketeers, put the Princess in the lane with 1 Musketeer. Defend the lane with 1 Musketeer in Battle Ram with your Princess and your Minion Horde. In the other lane, you want to defend with just the Goblin Gang. And then you counter push with the Miner and the Goblin Barrel if it's the right thing to do. on the lane that there's the most troops left alive in, okay? So, again, to review, Princess and Minion Horde against the 1 Musketeer Battle Ram, and then the Goblin Gang against the 2 Musketeers. That's how you handle that, because usually a 3 Musketeer player will not double down in the 2 Musketeer lane. They'll go all out in the single Musketeer lane. So that's how you handle that. Now, let's go way back and talk about the opening plays. We're doing this way out of order. Way to go, Ash, you noob. Opening plays with this deck. Basically, these are your priority, your top 4 opening plays. Can we get the drum roll, please? Number 1, Princess in the back is your number 1 opening play with this deck. Number 2, Goblin Barrel in the safe spot. What is the safe spot? It's the spot that will avoid the Tornado King Tower activation. So just to the right or just to the left of the Princess Tower. Number 3, Goblins 1 tile over at the bridge. Number 4, Goblin Gang straight up at the bridge. Those are your top 4 plays in order of preference by Light Pollux. So you'll always be able to use one of those 4 plays because one of those 4 cards will always be in your hand. Okay, now let's talk about single elixir versus double elixir time. Let's see if I can read off the right portion of the tips. By the way, guys, I know some of you guys get curious about the tips that are provided to me by these pros. So today I will go ahead and copy and paste the entire shebang into the description below. One thing that he mentions here, common mistakes, let me just go through this quickly, is the number 1 common mistake is not defending your princess. It is crucial that you defend your princess to keep her alive, especially against that 3 Musketeer Miner deck, especially against Miner. Make sure you're always ready to defend your princess against an incoming Miner. So, first, single elixir versus double elixir. Well, there's not a big difference, right? It's pretty much the same. The only difference is you're able to cycle to your Tesla more often. So against the beatdown deck, you can go ahead and use that Tesla to your advantage whenever basically you need it. So if you're going against a Golem deck, you can often cycle 2 Teslas in 1 defensive rotation. Otherwise, you're playing the deck the exact same way that you normally would. And guys, that's it. That is the full deck review provided by Light Pollux. I hope you enjoyed this episode despite my huge fail in the how to deal with 3 Musketeers. Then you drop your Goblin Barrel. What? Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoy this deck. Wishing you the best of success with it. Huge shout out to Bren Chong, my YouTube partner. Check out his information in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, take care, guys.